Take me back to the 80s.
Now, hold on a second, Cher. The 80s didn't actually die. They just moved to Seoul, South Korea, with a brand new energy called K-pop. And here is one of the biggest reasons that I now love K-pop so much. Let's talk about the girl group ITZY. This is the story of how ITZY went from monster rookies who dominated fourth generation K-pop to facing a crisis that made everyone question whether they'd fallen off, and how they're proving in 2025 that evolution isn't failure, it's growth. 5 girls walked onto the K-pop scene in February 2019 and broke every rule. They were loud, fierce, and refused to play it safe, becoming the fastest rising girl group in K-pop history and setting records that even BLACKPINK and TWICE hadn't achieved as rookies. By 2022, that same group was being called a flop, while facing controversies that threatened to destroy them and watching newer groups take over the spotlight they'd created. All 5 members are together now in 2025 with a clear artistic direction, showing us what it really means to reclaim your throne. This is their complete story. The beginning, 2015 to 2019. JYP Entertainment was already riding high on the success of TWICE when ITZY's story began in 2015. TWICE had debuted that year with Like Ooh Ah and was quickly becoming one of the biggest girl groups in K-pop, which meant the pressure on whoever came next was enormous. Could JYP create another group that would leave its mark? Piece by piece, the answer was being assembled. Yeji auditioned for JYP in 2015 and was accepted, and that same year Ryujin was discovered at a GOT7 concert and joined the company. Chaeryeong had already been through 2 survival shows by then, K-Pop Star Season 3, which got her signed with JYP, and 16, where she made it to the finals but didn't debut with TWICE. Yuna, the youngest, was discovered at a year-end concert. The final piece fell into place 2 years later in 2017. Leah auditioned and was accepted by JYP, and here's something interesting. She'd been accepted by SM Entertainment years earlier, but didn't join due to her parents' opposition. By 2017, ITZY had their complete lineup, but it would take 2 more years before they debuted together. Those 2 years were crucial because JYP was preparing something different from their previous girl groups. Wonder Girls had debuted with Irony, Miss A with the legendary Bad Girl, Good Girl, and TWICE with Like Ooh Ah, all iconic and successful, but all very different from each other. ITZY would continue that tradition of being different, but in a way nobody expected. February 12th, 2019. That's the date that changed everything. ITZY debuted with Dalla Dalla, and the K-pop world didn't know how to react. The song was experimental, bold, and nothing like what JYP girl groups had released before, leaving some netizens shocked and commenting that the song really isn't like JYP, and it's really shocking. Others thought it was brilliant, predicting that they will be a big success. The second group was right. Dalla Dalla exploded. 17.1 million views in the first 24 hours, breaking the record for the most viewed K-pop debut video at that time. No debut music video had reached 100 million views so quickly before ITZY, but the views were just the beginning. Dalla Dalla hit number 2 on the Korean Gaon chart, number 2 on Billboard's K-pop Hot 100, and number 2 on Billboard's World Digital Song Sales chart in the US, and for a debut group, these numbers were insane. Then came the real shock. ITZY won their first music show just 8 to 9 days after debut, the fastest time for any girl group at the time, and they didn't stop there because they followed it with 8 consecutive music show wins. By the end of 2019, ITZY had achieved what's called the Rookie of the Year Grand Slam, winning the Rookie Award from all 5 major Korean award shows. The industry gave them a nickname, Monster Rookies, and it wasn't hype. Even legendary groups like BLACKPINK and TWICE hadn't accomplished this level of rookie dominance. What made Dalla Dalla so special wasn't just the sound, it was the message. The signature line, "I'm different, different," became a generational anthem for teenagers who were tired of being told to fit in. And ITZY wasn't preaching self-love, they were living it, making that confidence impossible to ignore. Each member brought something distinct to the table. Yeji led with fierce precision and laser-focused presence, while Leah balanced the chaos with steady vocals and quiet confidence. Ryujin commanded every frame like it was hers. Charyung turned choreography into poetry in motion. And Yuna, the youngest, carried herself with a confidence that made you forget she was still a teenager. ITZY had arrived, but this was just the beginning. July 2019 brought ITZY, and ITZY doubled down on everything that made them who they were. High-speed track, self-love message, eccentric production. It solidified their identity and made clear they weren't going to play it safe or chase trends. They were creating their own lane. But the real explosion came in March 2020 with WANNABE. WANNABE wasn't just a comeback. It was a cultural moment. The song perfectly captured ITZY's DNA with its infectious beat, powerful message of self-love and fierce attitude, while the lyrics, "I don't want to be somebody, just want to be me," spoke to a generation struggling with self-identity and the pressure to fit in. Then there was the choreography. Ryujin's shoulder dance became one of the most viral K-pop choreographies of all time, and TikTok exploded with people recreating it. Students in school uniforms, fans across the world, everyone was doing that shoulder move. And ITZY had created the perfect viral moment at the perfect time. WANNABE stayed on charts for months. Korean radio playlists played it constantly. Music shows kept calling them back, and the numbers just kept climbing. Album sales multiplied, followers grew exponentially, and ITZY officially became one of the hottest names in K-pop. It wasn't just music, it was a movement. Ryujin, in particular, became Korea's it girl. She was everywhere. Variety shows, magazine covers, brand campaigns. ITZY ruled the scene and everyone knew it. Not Shy followed in August 2020, a song about chasing love without hesitation, and the momentum kept building. Then came In the Morning in April 2021, where they transformed into sleek femme fatale, and the song was experimental, blending genres mid-track in a way that caught some listeners off guard. Reception split, with some praising the boldness while others called it chaotic, but ITZY kept charting, kept performing, kept dominating. September 2021 brought Loco, returning to the colourful chaos that defined their earlier sound. Their album Crazy in Love sold 500,000 copies, making it their highest selling album at that time, and they hit number 1 on Billboard's album sales chart and number 11 on the Billboard 200, the highest position of their career. By the end of 2021, ITZY had proven they could do it all. Concept switches, viral dances, strong physical sales. They were selling out arenas and charting globally, while their music videos were racking up hundreds of millions of views. Here's the thing about ITZY at that moment. They set the tone for fourth generation K-pop. They were bold, confident, and unapologetically themselves. And at one point, every new girl group was chasing the standard they'd created. They weren't just successful, they were the blueprint. But in K-pop, nothing lasts forever. The crisis, 2021 to 2023. The first cracks appeared in a way nobody expected. February 2021 brought an anonymous netizen known as A posting on an online forum with serious accusations, and they didn't mention Leah by name, but they described a female idol born in 2000 with straight shoulders who debuted under a Big Three agency in 2019. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. The accusations were specific and serious. A claimed that Leah had borrowed money from a classmate and never returned it, made another classmate break up with her boyfriend and turned her into an outcast, and that when A had confronted Leah and her friends, they cursed at her. A said that Leah's group kept coming to her class cursing at her, and that Leah had posted on social media claiming A made false accusations. And when A spoke up in April 2018 after hearing her alleged harasser would debut under a big agency, she was sued for defamation. JYP Entertainment immediately denied the rumours by releasing a statement saying, "This matter is completely false and we relay our plans to push further charges." They threatened strong legal action against anyone who would defame their artists and said an investigation was ongoing. But then something unexpected happened. June 2021 came, and A and another accuser, B, were found not guilty by the Insan Yangsu police station. The defamation charges were dismissed, and according to A, the reason was simple. They had submitted so much witness evidence against Leah that the judges had no choice but to clear them. A released another statement explaining that they'd received testimonies from a friend who was also a victim and another friend who was present during the incident. And once they submitted these testimonies, the police cleared the case. JYP promised to launch a reinvestigation, but according to A, this wasn't true because the company wanted to meet the accusers in person, which they declined. Meanwhile, ITZY's manager and Leah's cousin reportedly started contacting Leah's former classmates to investigate what she was like during middle school. Here's the problem with how this all played out. The allegations were never properly cleared up. Leah herself never addressed the controversy, most likely because she wasn't allowed to buy the company, and the whole situation was left ambiguous, which hurt both Leah and ITZY as a whole. Netizens didn't get the closure they wanted, so many of them assumed Leah was guilty. What made it worse was JYP's inconsistent handling, because they'd made Yeonjin from Stray Kids go on hiatus over unconfirmed accusations, but Leah continued promoting with ITZY, and this inconsistency made people call JYP a criminal company. When ITZY came back with Loco in September 2021, Leah was part of the promotions, and for the first time something felt off. The song still carried ITZY's signature style, confident and full of movement, built for the stage, but the momentum that once felt unstoppable started to slow. The charts looked good, just not WANNABE good, and the excitement around the comeback wasn't as loud. People blamed Leah for the album's performance. Loco peaked at number 70 on Genie, number 8 on Bugs, and number 530 on Vibe, which were all-time low numbers for a group that had once led the fourth generation. People started calling ITZY a flop group. Leah became a scapegoat for everything, and she was criticised for posting on Instagram, dancing, performing, even breathing. October 2019 had already seen fans notice in a relay dance video that Leah's moves lacked energy compared to other members, and this lazy dancing controversy resurfaced. When Leah became the first member to get COVID, netizens somehow blamed her for ruining ITZY's promotions. The other members weren't safe either. Chaeryeong was criticised for not fitting Korean beauty standards, with netizens calling her ugly, and Yeji and Yoona were criticised for losing too much weight. There were also cultural appropriation controversies because Leah wore a Native American headdress on Knowing Bros, and Yeji and Yoona had braids and cornrows. But the hate toward Leah reached absurd levels. May 2022 came, and when ITZY appeared as dream mentors for 20 children, netizens criticised them for doing this with Leah still in the group. Comments included, while having a school violence member, and what crime did the other members commit? Meanwhile, the K-pop landscape around them was changing fast. December 2021 brought IVE's debut with a new kind of confidence, regal, elegant and composed, while aespa was doubling down on their futuristic concepts with experimental sounds and next-level performances. In fact, aespa's album Girls surpassed ITZY's records on the Billboard 200 chart, even though they debuted almost 2 years after ITZY. Lee Seraphine brought raw attitude and authenticity that captured Gen Z, and New Jeans became a phenomenon by producing 3 consecutive hit songs and becoming the longest-running K-pop group with a perfect all-kill certified song. Suddenly, ITZY was surrounded by groups offering fresh takes on what 4th Gen could sound and look like, and ITZY's 2019 sound felt increasingly like exactly that, 2019. Then December 2022 happened, and ITZY released Sneakers, which shifted everything. The track took a bright, playful turn away from their usual fierce sound, going colourful and quirky instead of edgy and intense. The change caught everyone off guard because after the sleek power of Loco and Mafia in the morning, the energy felt disconnected from their earlier sound. Fans debated whether this suited them, while critics questioned the sudden shift, and the general public seemed unsure how to feel. Sneakers did fine commercially, but it lacked the bite that had made ITZY unstoppable, and the viral spark that once followed every release just wasn't there. It got worse when ITZY's management issues became impossible to ignore. Fans were so upset that they sent protest trucks to JYP's office, and the complaints were specific and damning. Division 2, the JYP subsidiary managing, seemed to barely care about the group because they promoted them less frequently compared to other groups, and when they did, it was done poorly. For example, they released a trailer for ITZY's comeback on YouTube and Twitter but nowhere else, didn't even post it properly on Instagram, just on stories, and you had to dig around on YouTube to find it. Other JYP groups like Stray Kids and TWICE had cool creative projects and videos where they showed off their talents, but ITZY got mostly behind the scenes videos that didn't get many views. It was especially frustrating because ITZY is incredibly talented and could do so much more if given the chance, and they didn't even have solo Instagram accounts initially, which was pretty standard for big K-pop groups. JYP also organised a US tour for ITZY, less than a year into their career despite their limited discography, which made many question if JYP was rushing ITZY's development instead of building a solid foundation, and the company scheduled comebacks with overlapping schedules among their groups, NMIXX and TWICE, creating internal competition for ITZY. Perhaps most frustrating was that ITZY didn't get to participate in creating their music. The members had mentioned they wanted to write and produce their own songs, but the company wouldn't let them. And when they did help with lyrics, they didn't get credited. The Checkmate era perfectly illustrated the problem because the teaser films made it look like ITZY was going for a badass, mature concept. But then the title track was Sneakers, a bubbly, cute song that didn't fit the teasers at all. Fans felt confused and betrayed since the whole album was a mix of different styles that didn't go together. November 2022 brought Cheshire, and ITZY tried yet another approach. The song leaned more on melody than their usual explosive energy, even sampling Beethoven's Für Elise to create an intriguing, mysterious atmosphere. And some listeners appreciated the change, seeing it as a sign of growth, while others felt it lacked the spark that once defined them. The album broke ITZY's personal first-day sales record with over 275,000 copies, proving their fan base stayed solid, but on Korean charts, Cheshire slipped down faster than expected. 2023 brought Cake and Bet On Me, which painted a similar picture. Both songs were solid and performed with heart, but they didn't land with the same impact as before, and it felt frustrating because ITZY kept delivering quality music, yet the response never matched their effort. Online, the narrative shifted fast. ITZY fell off, became the lazy headline as people compared numbers, pointed to gaps, and labelled them as the group that couldn't keep up. The truth was more complicated because ITZY still sold hundreds of thousands of albums, still packed venues, still collected wins. They hadn't lost success, they just lost the spark of newness. And in K-pop, where trends flip overnight, losing that spark can make it look like you've fallen off. Then came the announcement that hit differently. September 2023 brought Leah going on hiatus due to health concerns, specifically anxiety, and JYP stated that she would be focusing on treatment for her anxiety disorder, while confirming that Leah would not participate in the group's new album or the world tour scheduled for January 2024. The constant demand to evolve, perform, and stay relevant takes a toll, and Leah's hiatus quietly reflected the human side of ITZY's journey. The pressure, the criticism, the weight of being in the spotlight while dealing with controversies that were never properly resolved. ITZY carried on as four by adjusting formations and redistributing lines, performing as ITZY while missing one of their core members. And something was shifting underneath because they were learning that growth sometimes means accepting you can't stay 19 forever, even if that's what first made people love you. The redemption, 2023 to 2024. 2023 brought Kill My Doubt, and it was their most mature, introspective release to date. The title track Cake brought back their quirky energy with a bright, easygoing vibe, but it was Bet On Me that really spoke to fans. The song was raw and emotional with lyrics about self-doubt, anxiety, and choosing to believe in yourself. And for many, it felt like a letter from ITZY to themselves and to their fans. This was the ITZY that fans had grown with, still confident but no longer invincible, and they were willing to show cracks, which made them more relatable. The album sold over 823,000 copies in its first week, a level of loyalty typically associated with popular boy groups. ITZY's fan base was proving they weren't going anywhere. Then came early 2024 with their third studio album, Born to Be. The title track, Untouchable, topped YouTube's global trending chart within hours, and the album marked a significant evolution in their sound and image with solo tracks for each member included. Most importantly, their world tour spanned 18 countries, highlighting their global reach and commitment to connecting with fans worldwide. For the first time in a while, ITZY sounded like they knew exactly who they were. The sound was polished, adorable, steady and assured, and the choreography still hit hard, but the energy came from purpose, not pressure. Each track in the album felt intentional because ITZY had finally found balance between strength and self-awareness. The response felt warmer than previous comebacks, not necessarily in massive chart numbers, but in how people talked about it. ITZY sounded comfortable in who they'd become, and that comfort translated into something more powerful than virality ever could. 2024 brought Yeji's solo debut, Aya, and it was the ultimate power move. Elegant, powerful, and technically flawless with choreography, styling, and vocals all on point. It cemented her status as ITZY's undeniable ace. Then October 2024 came, and everything felt right again. ITZY released their 9th mini-album, Gold, and it marked Leah's return after a year away, and the 5 of them back together felt right. You could see it in how they moved, how they looked at each other on stage, and the performances felt tighter, more refined, like a team that had been through storms and learned how to breathe through them. Gold sold 200,000 copies on the first day and earned a 2x platinum certification, which meant the critics who had written them off were suddenly paying attention again. But it was Imaginary Friend, a track from the album, that truly sealed the chapter. The song flipped expectations completely by leaning into softness instead of fire and noise, a reminder that power can also come from honesty. The vocals sounded gorgeous, the lyrics spoke of comfort and warmth, and the emotion felt real. It was a side of ITZY that didn't need to prove anything anymore. Critics and fans called it one of their best songs yet, and Billboard placed it among the top K-pop tracks of 2024, which meant Imaginary Friend became more than a comeback. It was proof that ITZY hadn't faded, they had grown. The B-sides Kiss and Tell and Locked and Loaded showed how much ITZY had evolved, more refined, more grounded and clearer about their sound. They weren't chasing mainstream virality anymore because they were building something more real, music that actually represents where they are now, the present, 2025 and beyond. June 2025 opened a new chapter when ITZY released their 10th mini-album, their first comeback of the year. The title track reignited ITZY's fierce energy, this time with a darker, more mature edge, and blending drum and bass with club-ready production made it feel bold, sleek, and modern. The concept flipped a familiar phrase on its head by turning "girls will be girls" into a confident message about women owning their strength together. The music video was cinematic, placing the members in a post-apocalyptic world as warriors reclaiming their space. And it wasn't just stylish, it was a statement fully true to who they are. Reception around the title track stayed divided, with some calling the hook repetitive. But once again, it was the B-sides that stole the spotlight, showing ITZY's continued artistic growth. Even if they weren't chasing mainstream virality, they were building something lasting. Later in 2025, ITZY dropped another comeback built on a hip-hop beat, layered with brass and heavy rhythm. The track carried weight and focus while the visuals were dark, sleek and cinematic, showing a calmer and more focused side of ITZY. This comeback showed a group that now moved with purpose, fully aware of their direction. Their live performances proved just how much they'd grown because vocals were stronger,
choreography sharper, and stage presence came from confidence, not the need to prove anything. Tours sold well, fans stayed loyal, and albums moved steadily. But the real achievement was ITZY's mindset, because they no longer measured themselves by recreating WANNABE. They were building a lasting identity rooted in who they are now, not who they were at 19. Conclusion. So here we are in 2025, and the question isn't whether ITZY fell off. The real question is, why did we ever think evolution equals failure? ITZY started as 5 loud, confident teenagers who kicked open the door for 4th generation K-pop, and they set records that even the biggest groups hadn't achieved. They created viral moments, dominated charts, and became the blueprint that every new girl group tried to follow. And that legacy is untouchable. But what came after proved something even more valuable, because they showed that growth can be its own kind of power. That maturity doesn't mean losing your edge, and that 6 years into a career, sounding different from your debut doesn't equal failure. It means evolving. K-pop often punishes this kind of evolution because the industry values youth, explosive debuts, and viral hits, and that's what gets instant attention. But real careers need something deeper: perspective, maturity, and focus. ITZY went from proving themselves to knowing themselves, and they survived mismanagement, harsh controversies, member hiatus, and an entire industry narrative that said they were finished. They watched newer groups take the spotlight they'd created and had to figure out who they were when they weren't the loudest voice in the room anymore. And you know what happened? They did it. All 5 members are together and healthy. They're releasing music that reflects who they've become, not who the industry wants them to be. And they're selling 200,000 albums on the first day. They're touring 18 countries and earning critical praise for tracks like Imaginary Friend that show dimensions people didn't know they had. The 5 girls who opened 4th Gen's door have now walked through it as women with 6 years of experience, growth, and self-awareness. They're no longer the loudest group in the room. They're the ones who've been through it and are still standing. Their 2025 comebacks prove they're not trying to recapture 2019, because they're building something sustainable, something real, something that can last beyond viral moments and trending hashtags. ITZY dared to be bold when they were 19, and now they're daring to be honest at 25. And honestly, that might be the boldest move of all. The story of ITZY isn't about falling off and reclaiming a throne, because it's about 5 women who refuse to stay frozen in time just because that's what made them famous. It's about choosing growth over safety, choosing honesty over hype, and choosing to become who they really are instead of who they were supposed to be. So when people ask if ITZY is back, the answer is simple. They never left. They just stopped performing for everyone else and started performing for themselves. And that's how you really reclaim your throne. June 2025 opened a new chapter when ITZY released their 10th mini album, their first comeback of the year. The title track reignited ITZY's fierce energy, this time with a darker, more mature edge, and blending drum and bass with club-ready production made it feel bold, sleek, and modern. The concept flipped a familiar phrase on its head by turning "girls will be girls" into a confident message about women owning their strength together. The music video was cinematic, placing the members in a post-apocalyptic world as warriors reclaiming their space. And it wasn't just stylish, it was a statement fully true to who they are. Reception around the title track stayed divided, with some calling the hook repetitive. But once again, it was the B-sides that stole the spotlight, showing ITZY's continued artistic growth. Even if they weren't chasing mainstream virality, they were building something lasting. Later in 2025, ITZY dropped another comeback built on a hip-hop beat layered with brass and heavy rhythm. The track carried weight and focus, while the visuals were dark, sleek, and cinematic, showing a calmer and more focused side of ITZY. This comeback showed a group that now moved with purpose, fully aware of their direction. Their live performances proved just how much they'd grown, because vocals were stronger, choreography sharper, and stage presence came from confidence, not the need to prove anything. Tours sold well, fans stayed loyal, and albums moved steadily. But the real achievement was ITZY's mindset, because they no longer measured themselves by recreating WANNABE. They were building a lasting identity rooted in who they are now, not who they were at 19. Conclusion. So here we are in 2025, and the question isn't whether ITZY fell off. The real question is, why did we ever think evolution equals failure? ITZY started as 5 loud, confident teenagers who kicked open the door for 4th generation K-pop, and they set records that even the biggest groups hadn't achieved. They created viral moments, dominated charts, and became the blueprint that every new girl group tried to follow. And that legacy is untouchable. But what came after proved something even more valuable, because they showed that growth can be its own kind of power. That maturity doesn't mean losing your edge, and that 6 years into a career, sounding different from your debut doesn't equal failure. It means evolving. K-pop often punishes this kind of evolution because the industry values youth, explosive debuts, and viral hits, and that's what gets instant attention. But real careers need something deeper: perspective, maturity, and focus. ITZY went from proving themselves to knowing themselves, and they survived mismanagement, harsh controversies, member hiatus, and an entire industry narrative that said they were finished. They watched newer groups take the spotlight they'd created and had to figure out who they were when they weren't the loudest voice in the room anymore. And you know what happened? They did it. All 5 members are together and healthy. They're releasing music that reflects who they've become, not who the industry wants them to be. And they're selling 200,000 albums on the first day. They're touring 18 countries and earning critical praise for tracks like Imaginary Friend that show dimensions people didn't know they had. The 5 girls who opened 4th Gen's door have now walked through it as women with 6 years of experience, growth, and self-awareness. They're no longer the loudest group in the room. They're the ones who've been through it and are still standing. Their 2025 comebacks prove they're not trying to recapture 2019, because they're building something sustainable, something real, something that can last beyond viral moments and trending hashtags. ITZY dared to be bold when they were 19, and now they're daring to be honest at 25. And honestly, that might be the boldest move of all. The story of ITZY isn't about falling off and reclaiming a throne, because it's about 5 women who refuse to stay frozen in time just because that's what made them famous. It's about choosing growth over safety, choosing honesty over hype, and choosing to become who they really are instead of who they were supposed to be. So when people ask if ITZY is back, the answer is simple. They never left. They just stopped performing for everyone else and started performing for themselves. And that's how you really reclaim your throne.